I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. We're at the end of our journey. 6 days, 6 Resident Evil movies, and we've reached the final chapter. And for what it's worth, I think this is a fairly solid way to bow out. If you haven't liked any of the movies up till this point, you're not going to have a Damascene conversion. But to round off a 6-movie, nonsense sci-fi action horror tinged franchise, I think you could do a lot worse than the final chapter. After that is the most egregious storytelling sin committed in any of the 6 movies. By now we've got used to the format. We have a movie, that narrative resolves, then we get a little stinger at the end, a sort of to be continued ... and then in the next movie that's resolved fairly quickly or sort of kind of pushed over to one side, and now we're going to tell this story and oh, here's this stinger. Resident Evil Retribution, the 5th film, ended with the coda of them all. The White House under siege by the armies of the dead and what Wesker called humanity's last stand, with loads of returning characters all now on the same side to battle for humanity against the viral mutant zombie menace. Firstly, the film starts after all that's over. The morning after the night before, as it were, and Alice is extremely hungover. Secondly, we find out that all of that, it wasn't really what we said it was. Wesker was just playing a trick. Everyone's not all on the same side. It was an incredibly elaborate ploy to try and kill Alice, which failed anyway. It was just a load of nonsense. Anyway, let's get on with Resident Evil, the final chapter. I'm a big fan of continuity, and although this does keep continuity from the standpoint of the pact between the audience and the storyteller, it's a little bit like a slap in the face. The battle we were promised at the end of the last film not only goes by without us seeing it, but isn't even the battle that we were promised. We're given a sop, a scrap from the table, with Alice facing off the next day against one of the flying creatures. After that, though, it's pretty much all systems go. We find that humanity is on its last legs. There are 4,472 remaining human beings on the globe, and plans are afoot at the Umbrella Corporation to besiege them, and within the next 48 hours all human life on the planet will be wiped out. Their plan is essentially one of enormous corporate greed. In a wonderful boardroom speech, Dr. Isaacs suggests that humanity is leading to a global disaster anyway, so why don't we manufacture one so we can control it and come out of our underground arcs once all this is over and just fashion the world as we see fit. A blank slate, a global tabula rasa. And so the Red Queen, Umbrella's AI computer, reaches out to Alice and tells her, look, I'm conflicted, my programming won't let me work against the Umbrella Corporation and its interests, but I'm also programmed to protect human life, and I've kind of sucked at doing that. So if you can get back to the underground hive facility beneath the devastated remains of Raccoon City within the next 48 hours, say, there's an airborne antivirus there that if you release it, that'd be neat. So with the mention of Ian Glenn, it's time for the last time for Who's That Brit? It is Ian Glenn, he of Game of Thrones, the man who has said the word Khaleesi more than anyone else on the face of the planet. Hang on a minute, didn't he die in I forget which one. Well, we've got a whole world of clones now, so character deaths are just, that was his clone, this is the real one. We actually get Ian Glenn playing a couple of characters, and towards the end, the really real, I promise, definitely real Dr. Isaacs, plus an insane clone of him who's got sort of religious fervour about his mission now. Look, the man's clearly loving what he's doing. He realises It's utter bobbins and is having fun with it in the great tradition of British pantomime villains. So the not-so-religious Dr. Isaacs has got some sweet armoured vehicles and he tethers people behind them as live human bait to draw thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of zombies on a cross-country march towards the ruins of Raccoon City, where one little outpost of humanity is trying to survive. And the bombed out remains of Raccoon City after that tactical nuclear strike at the end of Resident Evil Apocalypse looks pretty freaking cool, I must admit. In fact, the post-apocalyptic creds of this movie are fairly high after the really slick looking Retribution with all its underground facilities and simulations and clones, and it looks like a glossy perfume ad. I appreciate from your comments that a couple of you really like that movie, and absolutely fair play to you. It didn't do much for me. We've gone from a really pretty slick looking affair to a grim, grimy, sweaty post-apocalypse rubble and twisted metal. And I think it's a really cool setting for the final film set after the zombie apocalypse. The standout sequence for me is the siege between Dr. Isaacs and his zombie army approaching, and the huddled remaining masses of a dozen or so humans in Raccoon City having to resort to medieval siege tactics, trebuchets, dropping fire down on their enemies. It's pretty cool. The idea really is to bring everything full circle, bring characters back to Raccoon City and the Hive facility, so we get a zombie dog pack attack again, and we can see how far we've come with how pretty and pretty expensive this movie looks compared to the first one, which looked a little bit soundstagey. But by the same token, we've gone from using actual attack dogs made up to look like zombies through to a completely 100% computer generated wild pack of zombie attack dogs. And I prefer the practical end of the spectrum. You're just going to have to hold your nose and accept that not everyone's coming full circle. No Jill Valentine, no Chris Redfield, no Leon. I know they were all there, but we've kind of forgotten about them. You imagine that they sort of died in that battle, which is a little bit snide, especially considering Alice promised that little clone girl she'd be her new mummy at the end of Retribution, and she's completely forgotten. However, the ticking clock plot gives Proceedings a nice sense of urgency, unlike the fairly laid-back Resident Evil Retribution. There are some nice revelations towards the end about the nature of the Red Queen, and even though some of that flub stuff we've been told before as well, there's a grand sense of things coming to an end. But we've always got time for one more trip back into that laser corridor, and why not? It's like greeting an old friend at this point. I don't think the final chapter will win over any new fans, but if you do like the series, I do think there's a strong enough showing at the end to make the whole thing worthwhile. I've seen grander franchises end with much more of a whimper than a bang than this one gives us. This is not a series designed to say anything grand or reinvent the wheel. It's designed to entertain. I can't help feel in a way it's a little like some of the Rambo sequels, and I love me some of the Rambo sequels. I know they're dumb, but damn, they're fun. As I said when I was talking about the first film, sometimes you want steak, sometimes you want cheeseburgers. I will say this though, after 6 films in 6 days, I'm done with cheeseburgers for a while. I want something a little bit more gourmet for my eyes next.